Hello and welcome to another episode of Explore with Vignesh and I, brought to you by MOPA Foundation. It's been a while since our last episode, and we've been really looking forward to present this particular artist to all of you because he is someone who's extremely special to both of us. Probably one of the last links that we had with the past from the early 1900s, where he lived all the way up till 2005. One of the most prolific artists we've had in the history of Carnatic music, Sri Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer.
Yeah, rightly, like Rithvik said, we are really looking forward to this episode. Like, he's a hero for both of us, and to speak about Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer's music and how it has influenced us and how much we have listened to it. It's something very special to both of us, and it is really an experience to go through all our recordings again, listen to them, and try and re-listen to the nuances that we may have missed before, or we didn't pay attention as much while listening to at that point in time. And we'll try and bring to you certain minute points and points that may have been missed out while generally talking about this great artist.
So the first thing that anybody recognizes, or the ears kind of go to when you listen to the music of Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer, is his voice. It's a very unnatural voice in terms of what we are used to thinking of as a good voice. I say good voice within quotes because generally a good voice is thought of as something that has a very wide range, that is higher in pitch, that has a lot of open sound, that has a certain tone, a certain clarity, a certain texture. But his voice is, I would say, an anomaly to all of these things that we expect of a good voice. But does that mean that his wasn't one? I would be the first one to completely disagree, because his voice was so special in terms of the texture it brought into the understanding of Carnatic music. How beautifully he understood his own music, the art form, what he could do with both of that, with the capabilities of his voice, is what made his music and his personality and even the idiosyncrasies of his voice so special to somebody like me. The one thing I'd like to say about his voice in particular is that the voice is not just about tone or just about clarity or just about pitch perfection. To me, the voice is about emotion. What actually matters at the end of the day is that the voice is able to create emotion and create an impact that hits you on an emotional level, as opposed to it being just melodious to the ears. And I think that is a very difficult quality to achieve even in a good voice, because that happens only when the music is internalized and is brought out through the voice in complete unison. And that was there in every little bit of music that Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer sang, whether it was ragam, whether it was him just humming two phrases at the beginning of a concert. Actually, we'll play maybe 2-3 examples of him just humming before the first song, where what he hums and what the first song is, the ragas will have no connection. But the impact of the emotion of just understanding and being with the Shruti and just settling himself and just hearing the sound of his voice just before the start of any of his kacheris is magical. And that was possible only because everything that he sang had emotion or bhava, and that was at the forefront of everything. It was not sacrificed for speed, it was not sacrificed for arithmetic, it was not sacrificed for even say singing, wanting to sing slower. There are many times where when you try different things, it is very easy for the mind to focus on the intellectual side of it, because of which the emotional side of it often takes a backseat. So that was never something that happened in his music. And the driving force of what his music was, the passion, the power, the emotional resurgence almost of so many different ragas, in how he exploded, the range where he exploded, was all driven by this beautiful voice. And I think voices like this are important to show that the voice is merely a vehicle to, I think, transport the music as opposed to being the primary object where the music is. The music is within each and every one of us. The voice is just a vehicle. So how do you make even say a non-conventional voice or not a naturally good sounding voice be capable of still producing gorgeous music? And I think a phenomenal example of that was Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer.
So let's move on to his raga singing. Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer, from what I have heard and the interviews that he has done, believed in raga music thoroughly. For him, everything was raga music, right? From singing a kirtanam to singing ragam alapana to singing neraval to singing swaram, everything was raga based. He says every aspect needs to have raga in it. Raga is not something separate, swaram is not something separate, or neraval is not something separate. It just has to move in together. And you actually see that in his alapana singing. The way he sang alapanas with all the major ragas like Kamboji, Shankravarnam, Bhairavi, Todi, Karahara Priya, the way he sang it with expanse when he sang a Ragam Tanam Pallavi, or with while singing it for a Kirtanam, like these magnum opus Kirtanam like Aurangashahi or Upacharam Lanu or Amba Kamakshi, all these Kirtanams, the way he sang ragas for them was very expansive. He also sang ragams that were really short and just had the essence of it. I still remember there was one really small piece of Begara that he sang right before Lokavana Chatura. That was just the second song of the concert, I think, and he just sang a small bit of Begara before it, and it just brought out the ragam completely, the feel of that Begara that he was going to sing. And he took off with Lokavana Chatura and sang Swaram Swarit. So he also approached ragams by saying that when you sing a ragam, it should kind of show itself immediately. There is no point in hiding a ragam or hiding what it is or trying to guess. He says that when you sing it, you should immediately know that that's the ragam. That's the conviction that you should have in the sounding of that ragam, and that is the kind of mastery you should have in the phrasing, in kind of showing the ragam immediately. His ragam singing was also very feel-based, movement-based. The gamakas that he brought in, the gamakas that he sang were very influenced by Nagaswaram singing. He was also influenced by the Dhanama Bani, and that kind of brought in different aspects of movement in his music, the way he handled the gamakas, and this kind of also gave a very different flavor to his ragams. When he sang ragams like Sahana, when he sang ragams like Devagandhari, and even Shankarabharanam for that matter. So these influences really brought out something very unique about him, combined with his voice and his musicality. So that's something very beautiful about his raga music.
Yeah, when we say that his raga singing was influenced by the Nadaswaram Bani, it's not just listening to the Nadaswara Vidwans play and trying to recreate that with the voice. It is not as simple as that. In fact, when we say that he was influenced by the Nadaswaram Bani, it was not just the brigas, it was the way he breathed, it was the usage of the janta swaras within faster prayogas, especially in ragas like Todi, where the usage of the janta prayogas, where the usage of the faster phrases in certain regions and the repetition of the faster phrase patterns, where then automatically certain notes would have to be flatter, certain notes would have to take a different movement almost within the understanding of Todi. All of these were reinterpreted by his voice, and he used that, again, not in all ragas. You wouldn't find, say, a Nadaswaram influence when he sang a Devagandhari, for example. But you would find it when he sang a Karaharapriya, when he sang a Todi, when he sang a Kalyani. So, irrespective of what raga he was singing, he was very conscious about what influences were brought into them and what influences would work for what ragas. So, he was a musician of great thought, somebody who put a lot of effort into every little bit of music that he sang, where he was conscious of what was happening in every movement.
So when you take some examples of this, when you listen to the Todi that he sang for Ammananu, you will find it's a mixture of brikas, of like janta prayogas. Also, there's a lot of carveys. You look at when you listen to old Naswaram recordings, you'll hear a lot of carveys around pa, around sa. You'll have sung a lot of carveys, and the raga will move along with the carvey. So when you listen to the carvey itself, in your head you will have certain phrases of Todi that come in. You will have certain you'll actually kind of say, oh, okay, he's going to move into something like this, and and you will actually see that carvey leads to something very beautiful, like a phrasing or a development of a phrasing along with the carvey. Then there will be a fast phrasing, and then there will be a flourish. So this kind of development for ragams like Todi, Karahara, Priya are like brilliant the way he does it.
Yeah, actually one other thing I wanted to say was, whenever you listen to him sing ragam, you will rarely find any other syllable other than a. He used a lot of a's, but because of how we understand the tone of akara in music as understood through a good voice, you would never associate a Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer with akara singing or open mouth singing. But he was somebody who used that probably the most in his generation of artists. And because of that free-flowing akara of his and the breath control that he had, every raga that he sang felt, at least to me, completely uninhibited. Mm-hmm. There was never a moment where you felt like he was thinking about what he was singing, or he was holding back at any place. Irrespective of what happened, he went with the flow. He used the power of his akara, and the music just flowed and it was uninhibited. So that is also a very important quality of his raga singing. Especially you will find in many ragas where he would have started off in 4-5 phrases, before you realize he would have already established the shadja on top, and from there for the next 15 minutes he will just be exploring the sound and the tone of the shadja or the antara gandhara or the rishabhana raga like say Kiravani or Kararapriya or the gandhara and Kamboji in Shankarabharanam, where it's just magical.
Actually, when you say Akaram, the way he explores Akar, if you listen to this recording of Ragam Tanam Pallavi in Bhairavi that he sang, he'll actually start singing the Ragam. I think it's a Kalyana Kacheri. People will start talking. He'll tell them to please keep quiet and listen to this. And then he'll move on to sing Sa, just Bhairavi and the Kir Sajjam, the lower octave Sa, and just in Akaram, completely just A. People talk about nasality, nasal sound in voice, and he was somebody who had a problem, a nasal problem, and he overcame that and he used that in his musicality very beautifully. There were some ragams that he would just sing very, how do I say this? He'll be moving across the ragam. He won't stand at one place, and develop from, one swaram to the next swaram or something. But then he'll be traversing the entire octave, singing phrases and, just taking the entire ragam through an entire movement-based development. There is one Kalyani Alapna, I think, like this, which kind of just goes through the entire octave beautifully. He'll sing it through phrases and, and just mesmerizing.
Apart from the ragas like say Kamboji, Shankarabharanam, if you take Salaka Bhairavi, one thing that is important to keep in mind is that ragas like Salaka Bhairavi, Kuntala Varali are scalar in nature, where you can't escape the scale in terms of exploration, where vis-a-vis a Devagandhari or a Begada or even Shankarabharanam, Kamboji are all ragas that you automatically think of through phrases. So how does a musician like Semmangudi, who completely revels in phrase-based ragas, handled ragas like Salaka Bhairavi or Kuntala Varali? The beauty is that when you look at a phrase, the definition of a phrase vis-a-vis thinking of it in terms of swaras is abstraction. The moment you think of a raga through phrases, then automatically there is an abstract structure or an abstract mold that you comprehend through which the sound of the raga comes alive. So is it possible then to use this understanding of abstraction and employ that on scalar based ragas. Say ragas like Salaka Bhairavi or Kuntalavarali. I am using these two examples specifically because we can listen to both of these ragams being handled by him. The beauty of the way he sings these two ragas or ragas like this, for example, is that once the sense of abstraction is something that you are comfortable with, then the scale does not matter anymore. The possibilities within that scale automatically present themselves in front of you because you are using the abstraction as the driving force to be able to bring out the sound of the raga. So through that abstraction and through the emotion of the understanding of that raga, and we get the emotion of a raga from the compositions that exist. If you take Salaka Bhairavi, there is a Padavini, and that Kirtana is almost synonymous with Semmangudi, which means that the understanding of the emotion of that raga through the composition, along with his understanding of what abstraction in a raga alapana means, gives rise to this beautiful exposition of Salaka Bhairavi as an idea, where the way he uses the ni and the ga, which we would think are not important notes, because Sarimapa Dasa means the ni and the ga are just used to be able to turn back when you're going up. But how do you exploit that turn is where the beauty of that raga is and what he explores beautifully. Similarly for a raga like Kuntalavarali. So let's just listen to the two of those ragams.
Agarina Hari
He's also handled many ragams like Neelambari, um, Dhenuka, Bhavapriya, and Devagandhari, Sahana, and the way he sings these ragams. These are phrase-based ragams. It's his comfort zone, knowing his affinity towards such ragams. Suruti, the way he sings Suruti is just phenomenal. And like we said just now, when you take a ragam like Keeravani also, I think Keeravani is synonymous with Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer. When anybody listens to that Ragam Dana Pallavi in the 1964 Music Academy concert, or Tattva Jivatvam sung by him, the way he takes the Ragam Keeravani, like Rithvik said, there is an abstraction, idea of abstraction that you have, and you take a scalar Ragam like Keeravani, which is a scale, and try and kind of find phrases and try to develop those phrases without actually traversing the entire scale to show that ragam, just to show the sounding of that ragam. The conviction that he had he would sing in a certain range and it will still sound like Keeravani. So that is something beautiful about his raga music.
Yeah, actually one other thing that we often forget is that because he lived all the way into the 2000s, he is somebody who's still very modern in people's mind. But for somebody in the 50s and 60s to sing a flash of Sri Ragam or to sing Asaveri and ragas like this were extremely uncommon. So to create a comprehension of these ragas and to present capsules of these in concerts from the 40s and 50s and 60s is phenomenal, because now it's become normal for us to sing these ragas. But there were times when these ragas were not handled at all as part of alapana singing. So the fact that he brought so many of these ragas, in fact a raga like Kedara Gowda, when you listen to his Natakurunji, in fact I heard a very senior musician say, I'll say something, I know that it can be controversial, but here is what I think. Nobody in the Carnatic music field today can sing a Kararapriya ragam without a single phrase that sounds like Semmangudi. This was a senior violin vidwan, where he firmly believed that the expanse and the impact of Semmangudi's understanding and singing of Kararapriya as a ragam is there in every single musician who performs Kararapriya today. Just from the intonation or from the phrase or from the entire picture of what the raga of Kararapriya is or is understood as today. Which I think is phenomenal, and for somebody to have that kind of an impact across generations and across different kinds of ragams, and to be able to have created soundscapes that is so unique for each of these ragas is, I think, phenomenal. Even if you take his understanding of ragas like say Hemavati or Pantavarali, which are Pratimadimam ragas that he handled, the kind of texture that you find in his Hemavati is very different from how it would be if you looked at it as just a scale, or if you looked at it as just a possibility of say a few notes. So that also is very unique to him. He did not handle any Vivadi ragas as far as we know, except say a raga like Nata or something like that that has a suggestion of a Vivadi, or Varali for example. But his exploration of ragas was never limited by time. Irrespective of whether he sang a 30-second alapana or a 10-minute alapana, the raga was there in its entirety throughout the duration of his alapana. So that, I think, is a phenomenal showcase of his complete understanding of each of these ragas, where he could bring the raga in front of you in just a few seconds or say even a few minutes. And to have that control and understanding and an in-depth knowledge of each of these ragas, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, if you look at an example for that also, if you have heard this Dvijavanti Raga Lapna that he would have sung before Chetashri Balakrishnan, he'll just start with the Gandhara, right? And okay, this may be just because I know that it's going to be Dvijavanti and I've seen the list, but in that first swaram and after that, in the next phrase, you will know that it's Dvijavanti. And the Dvijavanti he sang was completely Carnatic sounding. Right? There was no there was no so-called lightness in the way he sang Dvijavanti. It was very, very Carnatic in its sound. And even though there were phrases like he'll sing the Padasapa phrase that comes in Chetashri, he will use that beautifully in the Alapana and in his Swarams. It didn't sound like, you didn't think that, oh, there is a Yadukala Kamboji phrase that's coming in Dvijavanti. It sounded Dvijavanti. Because that sound of Dvijavanti along with the Gamakas in the Carnatic sounding was completely, that idea was given to us. That idea and that sounding was, just given to us. So we got used to that sound, and you hear Dvijavanti in everything that he sings.
Yeah, having said that, I think it's important to here say that his grasp of the Kirtanas shows in his raga singing, especially when you comprehend the importance of Patantara, where we've had so many stories where across 4 generations of him teaching different students, they all get together and sing it's exactly the same. So the amount of internalization that must have happened with the Patantara means that he's also taken in the raga bhava of each of these songs in its entirety, and it's worked on him subconsciously, because of which when he sings a Neelambari before an Amba Neelayatakshi, there are phrases from the composition that you will find in his raga singing where it will come that naturally in the flow of an alapana only if the internalization of the composition and the nuances of Neelambari in an Amba Neelayatakshi is entirely within him. And I think that is where the importance of Patantara and how you internalize a composition is showcased. Where when you sing an alapana, it shows how much you've learned, how much you've internalized what you've learned in terms of compositional singing, and how that expresses itself through an alapana.
How you're completely aware of what you're singing through that Patantara. Even if you look at Ananda Bhairavi that he sings before Tyagaraja Vaibhavam, that he will, that it's naturally that Nidanisa phrases are very beautifully incorporated in his alapanas. When you look at his Tanam singing, he calls it Madhyama Kalam in one of his interviews. He doesn't call it Tanam, he calls it Madhyama Kalam. And he says it's one of the most important and most challenging things to, master in Carnatic music. And I think he mastered it beautifully. When you listen to his Tanam in Kiravani, when you listen to his Tanam in Natakurunji, Shankarabharanam, it's replete with Tanam phrases, with Tanam syllables. The form of the Tanam, the form of the Madhyama Kalam is maintained. You will not find one phrase that sounds like an alapna. Maybe at the end when he's ending the Tanam round, he just, sings a flash of the Ragam just because he's inspired by that entire flow of the Tanam and the Ragam that's happening there. And another important thing that I've noticed is he will sing the Tanam also with A. Some parts of the Tanam will just be with Akaram. And the akaram, when he sings it, it doesn't sound like a briga phrase or a male column phrasing of that ragam. But he will, how can I put it? He will
intonate with breath sounds.
Yeah, he'll intonate with breath sounds, exactly. He'll intonate with his breath and the breath sounds, and there will be a certain fixed, just for want of a better term, there'll be like a cutting, a cut, yeah, like a staccato. In the way he sings the Tanam, just with Akaram, without the syllables. It will still sound like Tanam.
Actually, that Bhairavi Alapana you mentioned, where he stands on that Sa, the Tanam that precedes it, there's an entire portion of a Tanam where he sings a good minute and a half in just the Mandrasthai Panchamam, followed by T.N. Krishnan mimicking the feel of how Semmangudi would have explored the Panchama with just his breath in the portion of the Tanam. So that is actually a wonderful example that we can play as well.
Yeah. Just with his breath and akaram and no tanam syllables are there, but you'll still hear tanam. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And when we say Madhyama Kalam, the understanding of Madhyama Kalam changes every 20-30 years. What Madhyama Kalam was in the 50s is not what we think of as Madhyama Kalam in terms of Kala Pramanam today. So when you listen to his earlier Tanams from the 50s till say the 70s, there is a slowing down of his own interpretation of what the Kala Pramanam of the Tanam is. But what does not change is the importance of the Raga Bhava when he sings Tanam. For example, even in the 50s, when he sang a Ragam Tanam Pallavi in Kedara Gowda, the Kala Pramanam of the Tanam for that particular Kacheri was much faster than what we are used to today. But to be able to sing and explore Kedara Gowda and that Kala Pramanam and keep the Raga intact and the Gamakas intact and to bring out the beauty of the Rishabha in every single way possible is phenomenal. We will also play that recording. The reason I'm mentioning this is because a Tanam is a separate entity in itself. It's not linked to an Alapana or the Swara in any fashion. Just in terms of flow, when we speak of flow, there is an intrinsic flow to it. Semmangudi was also somebody who did not break that flow. In fact, between phrases, as he's building up from one to the other, there are examples where he will use small tails, almost like, let's say, the ending of a Raga Alapana phrase. But if you're actually maintaining the meter, which you automatically will within the Chatushra gate of how he sings the Tanam, the gate is never lost or broken when he takes those breaks to expand onto the next sequence. So if you're actually maintaining the gate subconsciously, you will notice that the next place where he takes off is entirely within that Kala Pramanam or that flow of Chatushram or 4. Which is why this Keeravani 1964 Academic Kacheri is a wonderful example, because Vellur Rambhadran sir actually plays along with him for the Tanam. And normally when you have a Mridangam playing along to a Tanam, the impact is very different from listening to the Tanam with just the voice. There are pluses and minuses to that happening, where there is an immediate restriction in terms of flow, because if that accompaniment is not there, then the 4s and the 5s and the 6s and the 7s moves according to the way we think. But then the moment there's a fixed meter of 4 that is being layered on top of Tanam singing, to maintain that flow is very difficult. It's very easy to maintain the flow through just 4s and to reinterpret the singing of Tanam within those 4s. But what Semmangudi Mama would have done there is maintain the flow of what he sings in Tanam while using the Mridangam as a wonderful complement that he actually plays off of. In fact, for me, that is the benchmark for how a Tanam has to be sung with a Mridangam and how the Mridangam plays for a Tanam. That recording is magical. So let's listen to that. But the reason we are also mentioning that here is that irrespective of what interpretation the Tanam takes, whether it's just the voice and the violin, or it's the voice, violin and the mridangam playing along. What is important is that the flow is not hindered, is that the continuous nature of the subconscious rhythm that is underlying throughout the Tanam cannot be hampered at any point. And that is something that you will see in every Tanam exploration of Semmangudi Srinivasa
He didn't look at Tanam just as patterns also. We look at Tanam, we try to sing patterns within the ragam, and sometimes the raga is lost when you're concentrating on patterns. But for him, again, just to stress the point that for him everything was raga based. Tanam also had to flow along with the ragam. He was not searching for patterns, 3-5-7, or just singing 5s and then 5-5-5, 4-4-4, 3-3-3 to look some kind of yati or some kind of pattern. But that pattern that he sang was also complemented by the phrase of the ragam. The Tanam was also complemented by the phrase of the ragam in that meter, in that staccatoized way of singing Tanam, using the syllables, using the akaram and everything.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, in ragas like Shankarabharanam, because it is also linear in nature, it's very easy to find patterns. Yeah. But in ragas like Kedara Gola, Begada, it's very difficult to find a pattern that can repeat itself more than twice. Yeah. So in ragas like that, if you're somebody who approaches Tanams through patterns and permutations and combinations, then you can't sustain for too long in ragas like...
the raga gets lost.
Exactly. But for you to know when to make use of the idea of a pattern within a Tanam, and how many times the pattern can repeat itself, and where the pattern can actually be established and it makes sense for that ragam, and to be able to break that pattern when you know that continuing that pattern does not fit the mood or the essence of that raga, and to then be able to circle back into the flow of that raga is, I think, magical.
His approach to music, even though he sang right from 1920s, late 1920s, was very modern. He was a very, aware musician, aware of what he was singing, aware of his times, aware of aware of every time period that he was living in, how things are changing. And for somebody to approach ragams like Asaveri and all at that point in time was very avant-garde. Another beautiful avant-garde thing that he did in this 1964 Music Academy concert. I mean, it's a very special concert. He starts the concert by singing just about 40 to 50 seconds of Tanam in Ragam Nadai. He'll start by singing Tanam. Alright, and then he stops and then goes on to sing Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami. He'll sing Swaram for that. In another lecture, an interview of his, he would have said that, for handling ragams like Natai and all, he'll sing Tanam and show this. He'll say that you need to hit the Rishabam, so that it doesn't sound like you're just, elongating the Rishabam and singing that Vivadi Swaram, but the Vivadi Swaram comes in it, you hit the Rishabam and sing Tanam, you hit the Rishabam while singing Swaram, and the sound of Natai comes there. He does that beautifully in the Tanam, and then he moves on to do that beautifully in the Swaram. If you look at his Swarams in this song, in Mahaganapatim, the Rishabam is, I don't think the Rishabam is sung in this entire Swaram, Kalpana Swaram singing in Mahaganapatim in this concert. He will end with phrases like Samagama, right? And Sagama, Samagama, the Rishabam won't come at all. But you will still hear Natai, right? So when we look at his Kalpana Swaram singing from this point onwards, you will see that again reinforces the point that for him, the flow of the ragam, the Swaram has to sound like ragam. Has to be completely raga based. When he's singing Kirkala Swaram or when he's singing Melkala Swaram, the raga is something that flows through the Swaram also. In that interview, he would have beautifully said this. The Kalpana Swaram also has to, even though you're saying the spelling, beautifully he says it, that you're actually saying the spelling while singing the ragam, but
Alphabets.
but you don't look at it like spelling or alphabets. You have to look at it through the lens of the ragam. You have to look at it like ragam. Even when you're singing the swaram, and he beautifully sings it and shows, he sings a part of, some Kalpana Swaram in Varali very beautifully, and it's just phenomenal the way he sings swarams.
Yeah, and there are umpteen examples of how beautifully he comprehends ragas in the Kirkalam. I think one of the people who I can boldly say reinvented how we thought of Kirkala Swara singing was Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer. Because before that, I don't think it was done to that expanse or to that variety of ragams. For example, just out of the top of my head, I know that there's a recording of him with Lalgudi Jayaraman and Palghat Raghu, where in Nama Kusumamula, there are about at least, I think, 40 or 50 just Vanavartanam Swarams in Kirkala for a raga like Shri, where beyond say 10 or 12 or 15, it is very easy to get into a repetitive mold or into a certain framework that has already been established. But how fresh the raga remains across that entire exploration is phenomenal. One other exploration like that is his, again, one avartanam singing in Kirkalam. This also I think is something that is very unique to him, because more often than not when you look at other recordings, you will find maybe 2 or 3 one avartanams, then people will move on to 2 avartanams or a longer one or switch into the male kalam. But the idea of singing the one avartanam swarams was not just in Aditala Urukala Kirtanes or Ondrada Kirtanes for Semmangudi, but also the Rendukala Kirtanes of exploring one entire avartanams of 32 swarams. And the other example of that is for a Gajavadana, where he is singing with T.N. Krishnan and Umayalpuram Shivaraman, where he uses the beginning of the Gandhara of a Gajavadana beautifully, and both him and T.N. Krishnan weave magic around the Gandhara where it's almost hanging, swaram after swaram after swaram, and there's a point where he gets so overwhelmed by the beauty of the Gandhara that he is in appreciation of the beauty of the Gandhara itself.
He himself will say, "Ayo," over there. Like
and that's so magical to listen to, because you can see how inspiration of a single note drives so much manodharma and drives so much imagination and so much spirit in an artist. And those are wonderful examples for us to take, where there is beauty in every little part of music. It is only about how we choose to interpret that, how much we choose to take from that, and how we use that as an inspiration to bring out say our creativity. And I think that is again a wonderful example.
There's another example where he sing again, of course, Dinamani Vamsha is immortalized by him, and he'll sing one avartanam Kirkala Swaram for Dinamani Vamsha. In Chakkani Raja, in the Kantaki Sudra, in the Charanam line, he'll sing lot of one avartanam swarams. He'll start singing Korpe after the first big, one avartanam Korpe. When he comes to that half avartanam Korpe in Kirkalam, he'll be singing half avartanam Korpes in Kirkalam also, and then move on to the next speed. And it'll just keep coming, right? He is also known for singing fast one-raida kirtanams and male kala swarams in them, and one avartana male kala swarams for I don't know, for long, like 40-50 avartanams. For example, you have
Sitapati
Raman
with T.N. Krishnan and T.K. Murthy. That is one of the examples we have. There's a beautiful recording of him singing swarams for Janaki Ramana. Again with, I think, V.V. Subramaniam and T.K. Murthy, where the speed is lightning fast and it's just one after the other. There's another beautiful recording of him singing Gauli Pantu swaram using just 3 swarams. Yeah. Only the Nisa Re of Gauli Pantu, where it can be Maya Madagola, it can be Varali, it can be any number of ragams, but how beautifully he would have established the sound of that raga through just the rendering of the composition means after that whatever he sings you won't hear anything else but Gauli Pantu. And that also is again a flourish of just one avartanam swarams one after the other. When you speak about Kirkalam also, apart from just the Vanavartanam Swarams that he sings, even for say ragas like Mukari or Neelambari, you will find that when he moves on to say bigger Kirkalaswaram, the expanse of the ragam is explored in its entirety. The reason I say this is because it's very easy to think of swarams as devoid of being ragam, especially in the way you approach it during Kirkalam, because the amount of knowledge of the nuances between the notes and the movement of the gamakas is very different when you approach the same ragam in a Kirkalam as opposed to Melkalam. The same note takes an entirely different form. So then what are the possibilities that that note offers? In fact, there are Shankarabharanam Kirkalam recordings of him where you will find him explore the Madhyama of Shankarabharanam in almost 10 or 12 different ways intentionally. None of this is by chance. We often like to think that musicians created because it came to them naturally, but it is also important to say that many of the times it is because of years of practice and thought that has gone into it, because of which there is an intellectual process that has happened, because of which you are then privy to what happens at that moment. But that doesn't mean that he is intellectualizing the Madhyamam of Shankarabharanam while he is singing. It has happened at home. It has happened over a number of years. But the spontaneity of years of practice and the culmination of all of that is what happens when the exploration on that day takes a certain form. Which is why the same Shankarabharanam sung by the same musician over say 30-40 years still remains fresh, because each time it happens it is fresh on that particular day. And to be able to do that in Kirkalaswaram with raga music being at the forefront, with complete understanding of the nuance of each and every swaram in that kala pramanam, in that speed for each of those ragams, and cajoling and utilizing every movement, every nook and corner that it can offer you to be able to create magic is phenomenal. And instead of doing this in ragas like just Shankarabharanam, to be able to do that in ragas like Mukari, Neelambari, Suriti, Begada is, I think, phenomenal. And in my opinion, his exploration of Kirkalaswaram is filled with Ragabhava like no other musician was able to do before him. And this is not to say that the explorations before that were inferior in any way. That is not my intention. The fact that he was able to find a different perspective of Kirkalaswaram that was his own, that was completely drenched in Ragabhava is, I think, phenomenal, because we as musicians look for inspiration in every place possible. So if we were to take ideas from say so many different recordings that we listen to come up with an original interpretation of an existing idea is extremely difficult. And musicians will tell you that for you to create your own exploration or your own idea of a form that exists, like say something like Kirkalaswaram or Melkalaswaram or Neraval or Tanam, and to reinterpret that and to give it a fresh interpretation is extremely difficult. And for him to have done that with something as complex as Kirkalaswaram is, I think, phenomenal, because of which we all take for granted how easy it has become to sing Kirkalaswaram, because of years of listening and the years of impact of what these great masters have done. It has only made certain things that they had to struggle for and figure out very easy for us, because we have access to that.
Easily accessible. And just to say that when you say a swaram and when you're singing ragam without saying the swaram, it's a very big difference. Right? When you're actually saying ma, when you're uttering the syllable ma, and when you're singing the ma in akaram, there is a freedom when you're singing it in akaram, because in your head it's not ma, it's just that sound or movement of ma. But to use that movement while uttering the syllable ma in singing Kirkalaswaram is something that takes a lot of awareness, and that comes to us easily because we had these great artists singing Kirkala Swaram, especially Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer singing Kirkala Swaram. When you look at the way he sings Kirkala Swaram for Gajavadana, the way he utters Ga and the way he sings that Ga along with the movements, you can actually cut the Ga out of your head. You will see that it's a very raga based singing. Right? He's not just singing swarams, he's not thinking of Ga and what are the limitations of Ga over there. When you see that Ga, like me being a signal processing engineer, when I take occurrences of those Gas and I plot a histogram, I'll see a range of swaras over there. A range of frequency. It's not just one big peak at Ga, no, but it's a movement. Right? So while singing Kalpana Swaram like that in Kirkalam, it has to be a movement, for it to sound like raga music. It has to be a movement while singing just that one swara, while uttering just that one swara. That one swara can have a movement, ranging from, the Ga can have a movement ranging from Re to Da and back to Ga, but then it is still Ga when you sing it. So that was the beauty of how he approached Kirkalam Swaram singing. And even when he sang Melkalam Swaram singing, there was an awareness of how do you actually truncate that gamaka, how do you actually sing that, with a certain altham. And that altham kind of translates in the way, again, it sounds like raga music, not just like, uttering swarams in fast fade, or it doesn't sound like, brika singing. But it is like raga singing in male kalam, in a little faster space. Yeah. Along with the awareness of, how to move around with those gamakas while saying the swara. Because when you say the swara, the format of saying the swara versus just singing akaram is very different. And to explore musicality, to explore the raga, to be aware of it while doing this is something phenomenal. Yeah. And that just proves that how aware and how thoughtful a musician he was.
Yeah. And one other thing that this gives life to, when you have that much control and understanding of gamakas within a raga scheme, is that automatically it also opens up various different possibilities of finishing. Like say if it's Shri Dakshinamurte, Magari Sani Shri is the most common, the most straightforward way you can finish. Let's say in Shankarabharanam and sing Shri Dakshinamurte. But if you have the kind of understanding that he did, you will find in so many different compositions that each time he finishes, whether it's conscious or not, the finishings will be different. There are multiple examples of this. In fact, even in ragas like Navarasa Kannada, there's a beautiful recording of Palukku Kantacha for which he has sung swarams along with Lalgudi Jayaraman. And it is again just about 1 Avartanam swarams, maybe about 12 or 13 1 Avartanam swarams, not more than that. Every finishing in a raga like Navarasa Kannada is different. For a finishing on sa, Palukku, Sagama, Sagama Magari, Palukku, Sapama Magari, whatever are the possibilities, he would have explored all of those. And that is not something that you can do if you're actively thinking of it. If you're actively saying, okay, each time I want to finish and come back to Palukku Kantacha, the finishing has to be different. There is no way you will be able to come up with that. But if you're thinking of just the flow and the raga, and it naturally flows into Palukku Kantacha every time a different way, that just shows the amount of understanding of Raga Bhava that he has within the idea of Swara. Having just the knowledge of Raga is one thing, but having the knowledge of each of these Ragas within a structural idea like Kalpana Swaram is an entirely different thing, because it's not the same as singing a Raga Alapana. You have to reinvent the movement of each of those notes within this idea. And I think he did that phenomenally. And to use his swara singing as a link into Neraval singing, for example, he also, from what we've heard from many of his students, from people who were privy to conversations and interactions with him, he was somebody who believed that for you to be able to get better at Sarvalagu singing, you had to be able to sing swarams without karves. So if suppose you were singing Aditalam Orukala swarams for say Janaki Ramana and Shuddha Simanthini, then the 32 had to be filled with 32 swarams without karves, which meant that then for ragas like Begada and Suruti, where the Madhyama or the Nishada automatically yields for karve, for you to be able to reconstruct that into the idea of maintaining the ragam but without the karve means that you will have to then know the ragam that much better. And he is somebody who did that in Kirkala Swarams, where you will find portions of him exploring Kirkala Swarams without karves, even in ragas like this, where Kirkalam automatically yields to karve. What he did very interestingly was he brought that idea into Neraval singing. For example, what we understand as Madhyamakala Neraval singing is actually Samakala Neraval. When you actually look at the value of the number of swaras. If it's Aditalam Rendu Kala, there will be 2 notes per beat or 2 or 4 notes for every anga. So which automatically means that there are no karves in there. So the leisure of singing Kirkalam with say the exploration of flourishes or ragams to the transition of Melkalam where then it's packed. There is something in between that Semmangudi found very beautifully, which I don't know if he found that because of his exploration of swaram singing without karves or whether he found this in Neraval singing first and incorporated that into swara singing. That's something that I don't think we can figure out now. But it is beautiful that that idea takes a different sound when it is interspersed with syllables and words rather than swaram. So the movement is almost like a Tana Varnam where you still hear a certain intonation. It is not as strong as you do here in a Tana Varnam where it's a jaw movement. It's not a jaw movement, but you will still hear a constant movement without a karve, but within what each of the syllable or the vowel allows. So that opened up an entirely new gamut to Neraval singing between Kirkalam and Melkalam that we were used to, which is almost like a Samakala Neraval singing that almost goes beautifully with the gait of the song. Because the song is generally in Samakalam. It is neither in Kirkalam that has a lot of raga flourishes, nor is the Kirtana in Melkalam. So to find that space and to explore that space is something that he did beautifully, and you will find that in multiple different compositions. In Kshinamai, when you listen to him sing Neraval at Ngeti Jesina, he uses this as a beautiful link between Kirkalam and Melkalam. And I think that opens out an entirely different possibility of Neraval singing itself.
And also when you're singing this kind of a Madhyama Kalam Neraval, one of the most difficult things is to, have the syllables of the line in those spaces. Otherwise, singing this kind of a Madhyama Kala Neraval will again, it will start moving into Kirkala Neraval. The syllables have to be at those points in the Talam when you're singing this Madhyama Kala Neraval, and that shows how much, that shows the Patantara, how much is internalized the Kirtanam, how much is internalized the line, how much he has internalized the line, and that kind of, also when you're singing, there is a concept in Pallavi singing that people follow that you don't move the syllables around while singing about Pallavi in Ragam Tanam Pallavi. So this translating into that, right? The Pallavi is not something that you sing so much as a kirtanam at home or while you're practicing. But then this practice of keeping the syllables intact, kind of automatically you adjust yourself to doing that while singing a Pallavi and singing that same Madhyama Kala Neraval in a Pallavi. So it's kind of a musical practice. It's a musical ideology that you're training yourself to do with anything that is thrown at you. And it's a different kind of Neraval altogether. It's a discovery of a type of Neraval that is there. One Madhyama Kalam Neraval that is in between your Kir Kalam and Male Kalam. The way he beautifully does it at Kantiki Sundara, in Chakni Raja, at Yedi Jesina,
Actually, in one other place where this is beautifully visible is a Nalakala Pallavi that he sings, Dasharatha Bala Ramachandra and Bhairavi, where he uses this idea of filling the gap. Because a Nalakala Pallavi automatically has a lot of space and expanse. And irrespective of how much you try to fill the gap, when there's a specific meter that goes along, more often than not, it becomes almost a conscious effort to fill that gap as opposed to letting the flow take over the space that is available. Right. And he beautifully switches into this idea where the spacing of the syllable, everything is maintained exactly as it is, but then the idea of Neraval in a Nalakala Pallavi takes a wonderfully different form when he uses this accent almost.
Yeah, that is something beautiful, and of course his expansive Neraval is something that is just phenomenal. You look at, of course, his expansive Neraval in Kirtanams like Orangasai or in Yenduku Peddala or Amba Kamakshi is of course there. I mean, he does it beautifully. Again, there his raga music, the way he is influenced by Nadaswaram, his usage of Karvai and exploration in that region, in a certain region is of course very apparent. But to sing this kind of Neraval in a line like Dari Nerigi Santasilli in Marubalka is phenomenally difficult. Actually, it's a Urukala Kirtanam. The gate of the line is not Kirkalam. Ta 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 ta. It's a male columnish gate in line. But to sing an expansive Kirkal Neraval which is completely flowing in raga in that kind of a line is just phenomenal. In fact, in the famous airport concert that everyone hears, you will see him singing Kirkal Neraval to this line, to Dari Nerigi.
In that same concert, actually, the flow that almost the layer that Trichy Shankaran sir provides is so beautiful that it keeps the sense of rhythm flowing. Because when we are speaking about Neraval, we are speaking about different ideas of Neraval. The way Semmangudi Mama sang Neraval for Paluku Paluku in Samanam Evaru is unique. Because more often than not, you will find him barely sing the word after Paluku. More often than not, it will be just Paluku Paluku and him using the sound and just the intonation of the vowel U and exploring a Kararapriya within that. So at that moment, what is happening there is actually just an exploration of raga using Paluku Paluku, the syllables of those two words as almost the driving force to create a canvas of Kararapriya. But this is happening in the form of Neraval in Rupakatalam, where the meter is maintained blissfully by Shankaran sir, where he will embellish only the finishings where Semmangudi Mama takes a break from the raga. So the kind of understanding that is also required of all the artists on stage for an idea to actually take shape is so important, because it means that it is then an effort of coming together of creative ideas and understanding of creative ideas. It is not just one person's idea that can blossom without the other people on stage also being cooperative, understanding and embellishing it. So I think that is a very important facet that we have to keep in mind.
పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు 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 లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు 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 లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు 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 లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు 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 లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు 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 లగుదేనే పలుకు పలుకు లగుదేనే పలుకు.
When we think of Neraval singing, we think of it being very straight-jacketed, very defined by syllables and almost with very little breathing space. But when you have complete understanding of the ragam and the composition, what you can do with that space is so freeing because you don't see limitations within that, you see possibilities. And I think the moment you begin to see possibilities is where I think the magic happens.
Yeah. Is Neraval for Pallavi is also that way. Nalakala Pallavi like Dasharatha Balaramachandraya, or if you take Rupakatala Pallavi is like
Chakkaga Nibhajana,
which is Shankara Varnam is just brought out in that Pallavi brilliantly. Then of course Kiravani, there is
Brahmaiva Kila. In fact, he sang a lot of these Neraval Pallavis. I would say that his focus on singing Pallavis was entirely Neraval based. Where he would then use the same Pallavi lines in different thalams based on the ragam. Because Brahmaivam Kila you will also hear in Varali. Dasharatha Balaramachandraya you will also hear in another ragam. Similarly with Kalyani, where he sings Undarishanam Kidekumo, it's a very different takeoff point, but the takeoff point is so natural in how he brings it together in Kalyani because the focus is on the Neraval.
Correct. And also when you look at his Neraval singing, it's always a flow, right? There will be not just, he won't sing Neraval. So in some places he's not singing Neraval for the sake of singing Neraval over the Neraval Padano, he's singing Neraval. That thought of singing Neraval doesn't there. For example, when you hear his Tattva Jivatvam in Kiravani, it's just an exploration of that line. Paramahamsa Gurunadaya, that line, he'll stand for a carving, he'll sing Kiravani, then he'll sing that line 5 or 6 times like Neraval. He's not leaving a turn for the violin or doing anything, but he's just experiencing that Kiravani in that line, exploring different possibilities and then coming back to singing the Kirtanam and going on.
Yeah.
So it's not, that's just a flow, it's for him, it's just a flow of that ragam.
No, that again I think shows his awareness there, because if there is a possibility that presents itself in front of him at that moment, it may not be planned. He may not have planned to sing Neraval for that song when he started, but to not let go of that possibility is being true to the music, in my opinion. Because there, what takes precedence is identifying that possibility and paying respect to what the possibility offers and exploring it, but also knowing where to put a stop to it. Correct. Saying, okay, this is the possibility, I've explored it a little bit, and now I just feel like going back to the song. And that amount of honesty in rendition is important for all of us as musicians.
And speaking of honesty in rendition, the way he rendered his Kirtanams, every time. I mean, you've heard his students say that, the students are spanning generations, 5 generations, and everybody will sing that same Kirtanam in the same way, like they've learned it. And he, if you look at his music also, it has spanned about, 70 years, 70, 75 years, and over 75 years his Patantaram, even though his music has changed with time, the way he sang in the 1920s, the way he sang in the 1930s, the way he sang in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now, 1988 I think was the last, or 1994 was the last concert he sang. I'm not sure about that. But the way his music changed with his age, with his awareness of his own voice and music at that time is something amazing. But in all this, his Kirtanam rendition remained the same. His Kirtanam Pathantaram remained the same. If there is a Sangati that is sung, the next Sangati is decided. It has to be this, it has to be this. There was nothing that was missed.
The progression was logical, but it's not to say that it was lifeless, because a lot of people think that if you sing the Kirtana the same way for 40, 50, 60 years, it's almost something to be spoken about in a negative manner, but that's not the case at all. It's important to realize that just like how our music is moving, the composition is also moving in terms of interpretation each time you sing. You may still sing the Sangadis the same way. If I were to notate the Sangadis from 1960 and the same composition to 1990, the notation might be the same. But the life and the movement of the music that's happening within that notation, which is just a skeleton, is where I think the magic is. So even though he taught all of his students the exact same, the import of the music was not the same. And I think that is how you keep Patantaras alive, moving and relevant with changing times.
He was also a phenomenal teacher from all his students that we've heard. His students also span 4 generations. So from everybody that we hear, he was a phenomenal teacher.
Yeah. And somebody who managed to successfully establish a Bani through Patantara. It is as difficult to establish a separate Bani based on Patantara as it is to do with musical stylization. It is phenomenal that somebody like Semmangudi managed to do that in both facets. His Bani is solid in Patantara and is solid in musical exploration, where both have separate identities that were brought together beautifully. And I've heard senior musicians say that his music was such that everybody could take from it, but the moment they took from it, it became their own, because of the amount of space that his idea of music had, which is what Bani is. The moment you pass it on to somebody else, do they have their own space to be able to make it their own, and for it to take a different form based on their own ideas of music, their own voice, their own exploration, their own aesthetics, is where I think the success of a Bani is. And the fact that his Bani has withstood time and has now, I think, thousands of students who follow his particular Patantara is, I think, a testament to his just idea of music.
Idea of music, conviction of discipline in music.
Yeah.
That kind of shows in this. To move into him tuning as a tunesmith and as setting Kirtanams, existing Kirtanams from notations, or retuning Kirtanams or tuning Kirtanams from lyrics. He was a phenomenon at that. Today, many of the Swati Tirunal Kirtanams that we know today and sing today were tuned by him. The setup of Aurangashai that many people sing today was his setup. Setup of Sri Dakshinamurti that all of us sing today is his setup. And
not just songs of Shankaravarnam. You take something like Balakrishnam Bhavayami. In such a rare ragam like Gopika Vasantam, to find a song like that in the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini and to set that up. For example, the way he sang Mahaganapate Palaya Shumam, which is a seemingly simple song, but the integrity with which he follows the notation of the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini and interprets it. A song like Divakara Tanujam, for example. So many compositions that he's picked from there, where there is an existing notation and interprets that and gives form and life to that. Like he said, a lot of Swati Tirunal songs. He's also tuned a lot of Jayadeva Ashtapatis. He's tuned a lot of Sadashiva Brahmendral's compositions, where they've all become so popular. Many Ambujam Krishna songs also, where now it's almost, we don't even realize the number of songs he's tuned.
Yeah.
Because he's not somebody who said that out loud, but just by the number of people he taught and how it was dispersed, how he sang them in his own kacheris, they've all become popular today, and they are all unique in terms of identity and not something that only he could sing. Where he made compositions with tunes that everybody could pick up and sing, and I think that also shows the maturity of him as a musician, where when you're tuning a composition, what makes the tune stand out and what makes the tune last, where for years to come people can pick it up and will want to sing. And when we speak of the idea of raga, we also have to speak about his idea of raga within Vrittams. Whether it was Shlokam, Shringaram, Shritinandini Viharane, Maulo Ganga, all of these were
Mayayanam, Iravil, what?
All of these are synonymous with him. It is very interesting that he chose ragas like Dhanyasi, which you didn't probably hear him sing separately as a raga, but you heard more of his Dhanyasi only through the Vrittams and Shlokams.
Bilahari, for example.
Bilahari. Similarly, for example, if you take Hamsanandi, he sang a lot of Hamsanandi in his Vrittams, a lot of Sindhu Bhairavi, Jaunpuris in his Vrittams.
Shanmuga Priya in his Vrittams. Actually, you'll hear that Mayayanam Iravil Vrittam, that is just, I think it's a 1970s concert, if Krishnagana Sabha concert, if I'm not mistaken. M.S. Gopalakrishnan sir, Velur Rambhadran sir, and so beautiful Vrittam, Mayayanam. He just explored Hamsanandi in a way that is, vocally, right? Physically, in a way, it's just mind-blowing, and the way he explores Hamsanandi also. Effortlessly, you would have just gone to Atitarastai Shajjam and come back. Just beautifully. And right, with an impediment of voice like his, to do that effortlessly is something that takes a lot of courage and a lot of awareness of the ragam and how your voice is flowing at that point in time. So, yeah, he did that with that Virtam. We listened to that Virtam. Plus many other Virtams. He sang ragams like Nadanama Kriya, like Maya Maula Gaula. I heard that Maya Maula Gaula is one of his favorite ragams to start a concert with, was singing in Neraval. Sahana.
Ragas like Kannada, for example.
Yeah. And he also is a person who sang many tillanas, like for example the Centurity Tillana, the Sakrabharanam Tillana.
I have heard senior musicians call the Centurity Tillana Semmangudi Tillana. Where once I performed in front of a musician who played a lot for him, he said, "Are you singing Semmangudi Tillana today?" And I don't know what it was at that point, and then he told me that that's how they all referred to the Centurity Tillana, because he'd made it his own. So, coming back to his idea of just Vritam singing, the fact is that at many points he got carried away by the raga, where at some point the syllables would stop, the lyrics would stop, and he would just flow into raga, where he would just be singing raga for 2 minutes, and then it would go back to the violinist, and then when it came back to him, he would move back into the lyrics. And I think that idea of raga is there in everything he sang. From the minute he tunes the tambura and sings the first phrase till he finishes singing the mangalam in his kacheri, the idea of raga is predominant and is at the forefront of his music, his exploration, his idea of aesthetics within Carnatic music.
So, I mean, we can keep on talking about Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer and his music and what inspired us, because he was such a hero to the both of us. And for me, somebody who has not seen him, right? I think almost everyone in my generation have seen Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer. I had one opportunity and I missed it. I grew up in Bombay in 2001. He had come for the Lifetime Achievement Award in Shanmukhananda, and I just kick myself today for not going to that function because I had a unit test or something and I was in 7th standard and I didn't go for it. That was the last time I could have seen him probably. And for somebody who has not seen him, to be influenced by his music so much after listening to it and to actually hero worship him, he is something that stands testament about his music, his conviction in Carnatic music, his conviction in discipline, the way he sang, the integrity of that musician and artist that was held on for over 70 years is something that is phenomenal. And the way he has influenced us is in our music is it's become kind of subconscious for us. It's not conscious that we want to sing something like him or we are trying to imitate him, but the amount of recordings that we have heard and the kind of inspiration that we have gotten from his music is something that is ingrained in our music, in the way we sing, and we are still listening, still learning. There are so many things that we still listen to. We have been listening to his recordings. I have been listening to his recordings for the last 10 years, for the last 20 years now, and I still listen to the same recordings, and there is something new that comes out of it, something that I had not noticed. The violinist or the mridangam artist, play, and what happens in between. Even now when we go on car rides and we are listening to a recording, Rithvik and I will just, he notices something and tells us, and we have conversations about it. So that's how dynamic this musician, even after his times, is in our generation, is relevant to us even now, and I'm sure he will be relevant for generations to come.
When we speak of him being relevant, it's important to note that he was somebody who lived for 97 years of his life. So which meant that for him to constantly reinvent himself over and over again as music changed, as times changed, as the artists he sang with on stage changed, for him to be able to constantly reinvent himself, for him to constantly reevaluate where his music was moving, and to be true to his idea of music, the aesthetics, the grammar. He was somebody who was a deep thinker. Nothing that he did was by chance. He had a valid reasoning for every change in his own music that he brought about. Every conversation that he had with somebody about music was insightful, where there are still stories today about how something as seemingly simple as the Nishada of Suruti would warrant a 1 hour or 1.5 hour explanation from him. Something about how the Ga and the Ri and the Sa of Ananda Bhairavi is different from Riti Gaula would be something that he spoke about with such great passion. And for me, the most moving and the most revealing incident about him as an artist and what music meant to him is something that our Guru T.M. Krishna Anna shared with us, was that when he was towards the end of his life and in the hospital, Anna had gone to see him, and he apparently told Anna, you know what, I'm afraid for the first time. And Anna thought maybe he was afraid about, moving on or passing away or something like that. And when he said, no, what are you afraid about? What he said was that he was afraid that he's going to forget his music. Not that he was going to die or everything else that seemed inconsequential. But the only thing that was driving him even at that point in life was the music, which kept the mind alive, which kept him going. And I think for somebody to have that kind of respect for an art form that he practiced over so many years, and to pass that down to so many people with the same integrity, and to hold himself to that standard every time he got on stage, is so inspiring, and I think so valuable for musicians like us, where in today's world it's very easy to get carried away. But to constantly have artists like him remind us even today to be conscious of the choices that we make, and to be true to the choices that we end up making, are, I think, valuable lessons that cannot be taught. And to say that he has been a phenomenal impact, inspiration on just us, not just us, for generations of artists, is an understatement, and I think a testament to the values and principles that he held dear, that he passed on through his music. And it's been wonderful for the two of us to speak about him, but also reiterating the fact that what we have is so precious, and what we've been handed down is something that we are responsible for in how we nurture and how we take forward. And I think that is something that artists like Sri Semmangudi Srinivasa Iyer constantly make us reevaluate and be honest about. And that, I think, is one of the greatest gifts that we can get from artists of the past that we look up to. So for that, we thank him and all of the other great masters, and would like to thank all of you for listening to us, and to MOPA for giving us the space to, I think, put all of these thoughts that we just share in bits into a consolidated effort. So thank you. We had fun.
Yep. Thank you so much, and looking forward to the next episode.
కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం కనక కుండల కనక కుండల కనక కుండల కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం పీతాంబరం పీతాంబరం కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం కనక కుండల శోభితాంగ పీతాంబరం కనక కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం కనక కుండల శోభితాంగం సీతాపతి సీతా సీతాపతి ரகுபதி ரகுபதி சததம் சததம் பஜாமி சததம் பஜாமி